His grandmother was none other than Leona Helmsley, the infamous real estate mogul whose ultimate legacy might end up being places like this, one of many endeavors founded by the Leona M and Harry B. Helmsley Charitable Trust. Helping guide that trust is Walter Panzirer, who has adopted South Dakota as a second home and who has a big vision for giving back. You know, it's kind of ironic that you even ended up in South Dakota, isn't it?
It is ironic. I grew up in California, lived out in California pretty much my whole life. Worked as a paramedic in California. And one of the guys I worked with as a paramedic, he was saying I should come check out South Dakota. It'd fit in better.
You'd fit in better.
Yeah, because
what did he mean by that?
I love the outdoors.
Okay.
I was a real outdoors person. Anytime on my days off, I'd find myself camping or backpacking or just exploring the outdoors.
At the time, he was in his early 20s, working as a paramedic to pay for his college degree in the field and eventually become a physician's assistant.
Yeah, I was going, I'm going to look at it at its worst. And its worst is when, from the history books, when the cattle are covered in snow and frozen. So I came in January, spent a week and a half in Rapid City, explored the whole Black Hills, and really fell in love with the people, fell in love with the state, and fell in love with the culture that Rapid City had. And shortly thereafter, I was getting burned out as a paramedic and working in California. And then shortly thereafter, I just said, it's time for a change.
He transferred to Black Hills State University and got a job as a part-time police officer in Sturgis.
That part-time turned into full-time and worked more than cemented my way into South Dakota and spent over 8 years, almost 9 years as a police officer working across the state.
Now, of course, I am talking to you because of your grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, did you have much of a relationship with your grandmother?
Oh, absolutely. We had a great relationship, but she always wanted me to work for her. Throughout, I'd come out and I'd go visit her growing up and even as a teenager and as a young adult. And she said, come work for me, come work for me. And being the youngest, I saw what happened with other family members and other acquaintances, stuff like that. She was a very tough boss. And I didn't want that to wreck the relationship. And I said, you know what? You do your thing, I do my thing. I never wanted to, she said, come work for me, work in the hotels. And I never really wanted that path in my life. I was a very independent thinker, very independent, more or less a free spirit, just wanting to find me. So I was polite but firm and said, no, I'll do my thing, you do your thing.
Not many people probably said no to her.
No, not many people said no to her at all, because she absolutely hated it when I was working as a law enforcement officer, because she was saying, it's so dangerous, why are you doing this? You can have an easier life. And I said, this is what I'm called to. This is what I feel like I should be doing to give back to society, give back to the communities.
What are your earliest memories of her?
My earliest memories was pre-kindergarten. I remember going out and spending time with her and my grandfather. I remember in particular one of my fondest memories was always being able to go to the office with her. I would take one of their old briefcases and pretend I was like pushing paper and sit in my grandmother's and grandfather's office, and while they did their real work, I would pretend I was working too, and things like that. But my grandfather always seemed to have time for me. It was so cool. Like, I remember growing up, there was a big blizzard in New York City. Closed the office, we went back to the Park Lane Hotel where they reside, went up to the top floor and had a snowball fight on the roof. Not many people could say they had a snowball fight on the roof with Harry Helmsley. And Harry Helmsley was old business. Everybody knew him as old business, but he was one of those people that were really, loved his grandkids and took time like any grandparent would, but the outward world doesn't get to see that.
No, but it humanizes them so well, to hear you say that. Your grandmother, and obviously has such a personality and history about her. She had this nickname, the Queen of Mean.
Yeah.
I feel like if there was anyone who wouldn't see that, it would be the grandkids, though.
You know what? She was a tough boss. She was a very tough boss. And you got to remember, back in the 80s, women never had that role. It was very unusual for a woman to run a company. And she ran that company strict. Literally, all the ads about her going on the floors, checking for dust on these five diamond hotels, making sure there weren't light bulbs burned out. She did all that. She held employees accountable to their jobs because she was running 5-star hotels. People were paying a lot of money to stay there and expected the best, and she wanted them to have the best experience. So she was a no-nonsense boss that held people accountable.
Did you keep in touch with her throughout your life?
Yeah, on again, off again. We always kept in touch, pretty much for the majority of the life, we were always in touch,
On opposite sides of the country.
Yeah, opposite sides, yeah.
So help me understand then, learning about the fact that you were going to become one of the trustees, or you had this opportunity to become one of the trustees.
I had no idea that was going to happen.
Right?
Yeah, that was...
So this is when? What year?
This was upon her death, so approximately like 12, 13 years ago.
Okay, and had you seen her, talked to her leading up to that?
Up to that, I had kids, I was married, I was working as a police officer. I didn't get to travel as much because I had, commitments to my job, but my wife and kids, they saw my grandmother and there would be my kid's great-grandmother quite frequently and had a really good relationship. But I had no idea that I would be placed in this situation. Never inquired on her will or what she planned on doing with anything. I figured it's her money. She can do whatever she wants with it.
She never told you?
She never told me. It was one of those. It wasn't my business. It was her business. And the day that she passed, we were getting ready to go to the funeral and make funeral arrangements and all that other stuff that goes along with that. We got a phone call from a lawyer saying, you've been named in the will and also in the trust as a trustee. And I said, really, as a trustee of what? And they said, well, we'll talk. So we got to New York, had a meeting, and found out that myself and my brother and some business associates all got named as trustees for this brand new charitable trust where 99% of her assets were going to.
Was there any communication from her about why?
No, none. We can all speculate why, but she never.
Why do you think?
I don't know. I think part of it was, I never really wanted anything.
Never asked her for anything?
Never asked for anything. And I was straight up with her. I was one of the, probably like you said earlier, one of the few people said, no, I don't want to work for you, But kind of ironic, she got her way in death. I am working for her now, so.
It probably showed her something about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, who knows? Like I said,
yeah.
She judged character. She came into people's lives all the time, and that was her job. She had interaction with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and she had to make a judgment call. So.
How old were you when that happened?
Got to think back. I was in my 30s.
So you had a decision to make because you had a career.
Absolutely, and with that, I should say, we recently moved to Spearfish. I left law enforcement after that because I didn't see myself doing law enforcement forever. And I was studying to be a pastor through the Nazarene Church, working more or less with, I felt my calling was to the underserved. So it wasn't necessarily a call to, preach every Sunday morning. I wanted to work, whether it was with the homeless, the poor, wasn't sure where, but that's where I felt I was called to do. So I was actually 2 or 3 classes from ordination when this all changed. And I never thought in a million years I'd be sitting where I'm sitting now. I figured I was going to be somewhere working with the less unfortunate. And here I am.
He says he believes on a spiritual level that his career journey up until becoming a trustee equipped him with the experience to leverage giving for the betterment of many.
Some people believe in divine providence. I believe in providence, and everything's guided. And you can kind of see the fingerprints of, if I wasn't on this pathway, I don't think I would be as effective helping run this trust with with the other folks.
Absolutely. So you hear there's a trust. Did you have any idea of the amount? At some point.
At some point, after the first meeting, I heard the amount, and the amount was pretty much, the order was to sell off all our assets and place it into a trust, which the executors, I was one of, did quite successfully. And to me, that was, hearing the amount of money going into the trust was mind-blowing. This was something where it was so exciting to see, thinking, what can we do to help the greater good of society? And the cool thing is, my grandparents left a blank page. They left full discretion to the trustees of where to spend.
How much money?
At that time, it was $5 billion. And now, since with investments and everything, we're over $8 billion.
It's also given $3 billion away, including more than $500 million in the Midwest to improve access to health care in rural areas. That includes millions to build the former Avera e-care operation, now Avel.
The emergency rooms in rural South Dakota and rural America aren't generally staffed by board-certified emergency room physicians like you would find in Rapid City, Aberdeen, or Sioux Falls. They're staffed by family practice physicians. So they're working a clinic during the day, and if they get an emergency call, they come in at night, and they're a great service, but that's not their specialty. So if we can supplement with a virtual care, it helps retains the physicians, give the physicians actually a real life outside, and helps them along.
Most recently, the trust contributed to help build the Helmsley Behavioral Health Center, in addition to Avera Behavioral Health, which addresses growing psychiatric needs among children and adults.
If you're having a psychiatric emergency, you need the help. You don't necessarily need an ER, or even what was it going on even worse. I remember working as a law enforcement officer. People were ending up in jail, and still it breaks my heart to this day. Going, you could have a medical condition and end up incarcerated. That's totally the wrong end of doing things. Everything else, if you're having a heart attack, you end up at a hospital. If you're having a mental version of a mental attack, being in jails, like, no one goes to jail for medical treatment. And that's something we're trying to change, and we've had some very good success partnering with our law enforcement partners. In South Dakota, we pioneered the first in the nation, the virtual care center, virtual crisis care, where just about almost every county has access to, with their sheriff's departments, tablets, where it beams in a whole virtual crisis care team, whether it's psychologists, specially trained nurses, social workers, the whole gamut of the population. So when they get a call of someone's acting suicidal or someone's not acting right, they can deploy this via virtual technology and do an assessment and see if that person is an actual threat to themselves or a threat to others, and where would the best possible care be received.
The trust has global reach, though, contributing to everything from addressing poverty in New York City to a vulnerable children's program in sub-Saharan Africa to researching type 1 diabetes, Crohn's, and colitis.
Do you see the Helmsley Trust continuing to build on those key areas of focus that you talked about, or are there other areas where you might expand?
Well, right now, we're focused in on rural. We're still focused on rural health. We're still focused. There's a lot of work to be done in the areas of mental health. There's a lot of work to be done even in addressing physician shortages, and the whole COVID thing that came through has put a huge burden on healthcare. So many nurses are burned out. So many caregivers, technicians, physicians are calling it quits because of the stresses that they've seen and really the horrible trauma.
So, okay, what do you do when you are not working on trust-related business?
Well,
not sure how often that is.
It's more than a full-time job working at trust-related businesses, because I'm passionate not only about rural healthcare, I'm passionate about every area of the trust. In particular, I love the rural healthcare health care area and the vulnerable children's area. But I love spending time with my family. I've always been very family driven, family grounded. And my kids are getting older. They're getting close to leaving the house. Some of them have left the house and are in college or on their careers and looking to what they want to do. So I'm trying to take in as much family time as I can, because pretty soon I'll be an empty nester. And my wife and I will be. Yeah.
You have a hunting lodge, I should mention, in South Dakota.
We have a hunting lodge in South Dakota, staying busy with that.
The family now lives in Nevada, and Panzirer can see empty nesterhood not too far in their future.
Have you thought about, you're still early in your career, you're 40, what?
What am I, 45, 46, somewhere right around there.
Mid-40s?
Yeah,
Okay,
mid-40s.
I mean,
I'm still early in my career. I'm
certainly
not
if
going
you want-
anywhere. I'm not done retire. There's too much to do, just not only with rural America to improve access to care, because it shouldn't matter where you live, your outcomes, your healthcare outcomes. But, you know, there's so much in the world that's troubling that's going on. Things like our vulnerable children program. There's the poor is getting poorer in Africa, and trying to alleviate disease burdens and help rural Africa succeed. And that's
a heavy lift.
It's a huge heavy lift. And same thing with what our disease research. You know, I'm not doing. Anybody who says diabetes will be cured in 3-4 years, they're crazy. You know, it's not. It's an ongoing thing where we got to get more technologies to help diabetics and more research to help all autoimmune diseases. There's just so much to be done. So it's something where, you know, I'm not going anywhere. I'll probably be at this well into my 70s. You know, God willing. So.
Do you ever think about what your grandparents would think about what you have all done?
Yeah, I think they would be proud of all of us at the Trust. We have done something where we were very much thoughtful of where we wanted to go and what was best. We didn't want to have a cookie cutter approach to anything we do at the Trust. And everything we look at doing is long-term sustainability. So when the grant's over, it should be still working, you know, not failed. But I think they'd be very proud. I think they'd be very proud of what we've done with disease research. We've been able to help assist bring new products like continuous glucose monitoring to market. We've been helped in that effort. We've helped with new efforts in diabetes as well, with educating people, which the Biden administration has brought forward of insulin for everybody, low-cost insulin, because can you imagine not being able to afford your insulin? That's like saying you can't afford your oxygen. You know, you've cut off from the air supply of the world. Without insulin, you die. So we've done some great things to help that area in diabetes. They'd be so proud of us of what we've done with cancer care access in rural America, to cardiac access and cardiac treatments in rural America. I think my grandmother would be very proud. And also, too, you didn't even touch on my grandparents' giving areas. They were philanthropists on their own before death, but they did it quietly. My grandmother was very proud of her image, her very tough image that she forged throughout the 70s and 80s, but she did things quietly. Most people don't know that when Hurricane Katrina came through, she was one of the first people to write a $5 million check anonymously to Hurricane Katrina relief. She also built hospitals and wings across New York and City and Connecticut. She also did when early in the early 90s, when the African American churches were being burned in the South, she quietly gave money, a Jewish woman, to rebuild these churches. And
I'm guessing her name wasn't
her
on
name
a lot
was
of these
never
things.
on that, because I even asked her, I said, why aren't you putting your name on that? And she said, I don't want it to wreck my reputation. People need to know I'm tough. And she equivalated public giving, if people saw it as something that could affect her tough business reputation. She didn't want to be taken advantage of.
One of the things that I always remember about the trust when we report on the trust is it's very important that we get the name right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. My grandmother was very, very insistent, saying the trust should be called the Leona M and Harry B. Helmsley Charitable Trust. That was the one thing where
that's the non-negotiable.
That's the non-negotiable. She had that in trust documents saying that even though it's a mouthful, I know it's a mouthful for the reporters.
It's stuck.
It's
I can
stuck.
tell you that. I know.
But it is the requirement that the donations and the investments made by the Helmsley Charitable Trust shall have that full moniker on everything from donor walls to reporting.
We got the message.
Yep.
We'd like to thank MarketBeat for sponsoring our CEO series. Stay tuned for more conversations with CEOs making news throughout the year. And of course, for all your latest business headlines, head over to www.siouxfalls.business.